Assignment, starring
M.L. Elrick
as Steve Mitchell.
Yeah, danger is my assignment. I get sent to a lot of places I can't even pronounce. They all spell the same thing, though, trouble. But when I walk into the office, I don't realize this assignment's going to end up with me smashing a spy ring because a trained SEAL gets a bad case of the blues.
Get your finger out of my face. Get your finger out of my face.
Take the first shot, then, if you want to, Counselor.
Get your finger out of my face.
It's gone.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on.
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now, Elrick?
Hey, kids. Thanks for joining us here on ML Elrick, Soul of Detroit. I am your host, the aforementioned ML Elrick, investigative reporter at Fox 2 News, and your pal for the next 58 minutes or so with my partner, my wingman, my down on his luck, possibly highly contagious.
I just can't shake any disease right now.
You know,
what am I going to have next week?
All that bad living is finally caught up with you. Of course, that's
no.
Marc Fellhauer.
Wait a sec. It didn't start till I had kids.
Well,
is that the bad living you're talking about? Because that I might agree with that.
Well, some good living can lead to the kids. I have to say that that my life got better when I had kids, and I started to see a doctor for the first time because
exactly.
You don't get sick until they come home and they start to infect you with whatever super bugs that they're ginning up at the daycare or with their little buddies when they're putting every damn thing they can find in their mouth. But Mark and I are here. We're gonna plow through this. We'll be joined a little later on the MCI sponsored Brick Phone by Shawn Windsor of the Detroit Free Press. We may have a visit from podcast impresario Drew Lane a little later on the show. We'll see if he makes it down here. I know we've got a couple topics he's very interested in. And it's just great to be here as a part of the Red Shovel Network. I'm sure you know the Drew and Mike podcast, where Mark spends most of his time, the flagship of our burgeoning network. There's a new No BS News Hour with LaDuff, who broke some news about my colleague, Huel Perkins, or at least everybody's talking about that. So,
what news? Which one? What piece in particular?
Well,
what is the buzz back at Fox 2?
I have not heard the whole thing, but people keep coming up to me and saying, "Is Huel retiring? Is Huel quitting?" And I said, "Well, I know he doesn't want to work forever, but I don't know if people are reading between the lines there. So I'm going to have to."
He's closer today than he was yesterday, and tomorrow he'll be closer than he was today.
Well, it's sort of like getting older, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting older or you're dead. So you're moving on one end of the continuum. And then, of course, there's a no-filter sports show with Eli Zaret, Denny McClain, and Bob Page. So we got a lot to offer you here on the Red Shovel Network, but we appreciate you spending some of your time with us. There's a lot to talk about. I want to talk about something that has fascinated me for years, the parallels between Kwame Kilpatrick and Donald Trump. And it's been very much on my mind with the conclusion of the Mueller investigation, which in many ways reminds me of the odyssey I went through with my old partner at the Free Press, Jim Schaefer, investigating the Manoogian Mansion party rumor. But first, I got to get you caught up on the week at Fox 2, because we're going to be on TV this week talking about the podcast. So you may be listening to us because you just saw us on TV. If so, welcome to the club. But I've been helping out with daily news, which means a lot more stories than I'm used to doing. I'll spend, a month or two on a story. Well, when you're a daily news guy, you're doing 2 or 3 stories a day. And I've today.
Didn't you have was this the snake?
Yeah, that was yesterday. Today I was in court
okay.
with Bob Carmack, which is always kind of weird. But
will that end?
On Monday, I come in and they want me to go out to a cabin where someone has stolen a ancient violin and a old school muzzle loader rifle. So that was kind of weird. And then, we investigated. All we can determine by the end of the day was that Fess Parker, who played both Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, and it's not Daniel, it's Daniel Boone, was not responsible. And then yesterday I got sent out to Rockwood, to this really cool pet shop the I Love My Pets shop. Super nice people. In fact, one of the women that we interviewed, she reminded me of Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Rec, which was very cool. But we found out that they had some surveillance camera video of a guy who went in and stuck a 4.5-foot python in his pants to abscond with it. It's a ball python. Now it may be a cock and ball python, but he took it. Its name was Noodle. So it's,
everyone likes to talk about that and joke about how, obviously the snake penis reference, but the pants are made to put something like that in there. You're not going to put it in your shirt. Where else are you going to put it?
Maybe there's less room in my pants than your pants.
That's the end of those underwears.
Well, that goes without saying.
But that's
why was
that's
he
not what I want to put down
stealing
there.
it?
No one knows. It's apparently not
worth a
very
lot?
much. No, and I asked if it seemed like he was there as part of a prank, but when you see how this guy operates, and you can see the story at fox2detroit.com, he just kind of is a geek.
Oh, what a loser.
Yeah.
Why not just run out just take it and run out?
Well, that's the thing. He sticks in his pants and then he wanders around for a while.
Yeah.
He's not even like, well, I better get this thing because it does have teeth.
That's got to be that cannot be the first time he's had a serpent or some other animal in his pants. That can't be. If he's going to walk around casually,
was it the?
He must have tried it out at home. Maybe this is some weird fetish that he has.
Was it Derek Smalls of Spinal Tap who said that fans fetishized the bands because it looks like they had armadillos in their trousers?
That's right, yeah. Maybe that's why.
So maybe he's had an armadillo in a trouser. I don't know. Although armadillos could curl up, that would be very uncomfortable, even if you're wearing some of those Duluth Trading Company pants that I guess have lots of room in all the right places. But that's been a very, very weird week.
Let's see your penis.
Do you like doing the beat?
It's not over yet.
Do you like doing different stories every day, or do you like
so for the daily stories that allow us to be a little creative, I really like, but the meat grinder, which is what I call sort of the litany of sorrows that a lot of daily reporters in the TV news business have to cover, I don't like those very much, just because it kind of reminds me of how tenuous our grip on life is and how life is cheap in this city. I mean, I feel dirty and depressed to say that I've seen us report on so many children who were shot by other children or by people who were mad at their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their neighbors, or they got the wrong house. I can't even distinguish them.
It's always amazed me when there's a mass shooting because it's so unbelievable and it used to be more rare, but it's so wild that it really grasped the attention of everybody. But yet you watch the news every night. There's shootings every night.
Oh, and high school shootings, I think a lot of them don't even make the news anymore.
That's incredible.
I mean, you've got to kill a lot of kids. And now, as Parkland, I don't want to say it fades from consciousness, it sort of becomes a little dimmer. Now some of the survivors are committing suicide. So it's, I stories like that, if I had to cover a Parkland story or this shitbag in New Zealand, I would be interested and excited to cover it because of the opportunity to dig into the background of the perpetrator. And I also find a lot of value in the remembrances of the victims. One of the best things I think the New York Times has done, and one of the simplest, was they committed to do at least a short obituary on everybody killed in the Trade Tower attack of 9/11. And I read every single one of them. Not because I was interested in all the people. I mean, I don't want to sound mean, but because I felt it was my obligation as someone who is alive to read about the lives of these people who were taken randomly and wantonly, and if you ask me, for no damn good reason.
Clearly, but I have to believe there's more clicks and more eyeballs on the background of the perpetrator than the obits.
Oh,
maybe I'm a bad person because
collectively
I kind of want to know what makes a maniac asshole click like that when everybody else is just random.
Well, and this guy lived. My standard line is, the problem with murder suicides is they got the order wrong.
Yeah,
without
a doubt.
If you're going to kill somebody and yourself, kill yourself first, and if you still feel like killing the other person, then you can do
Good
it.
luck.
But, I think your priorities are all wrong in so many ways. But, excuse me, I want to talk a little bit about the big news between the New Zealand shooting and between some of the sillier stories I did this week. And that's the Mueller Report. And I just want to give you a quick quiz, Mark. I do this when I speak to groups, and I like to ask them who I'm talking about. So I'm going to describe somebody who, when they became a very well-known person, was sort of a new face on the political scene. They promised quick results if they were elected. They represent a racial group that felt very repressed and underappreciated and under assault. They criticized their opponent for having a family member or being part of a family that had deep criminal roots or was rife with law breaking. They surrounded themselves with members of their family in their inner circle. They made them highly ranking officials, and they consulted them almost exclusively. They were a political novice when they came on the political scene, and they very quickly made friends and ingratiated themselves and won the support of influential and successful business leaders. While all this is happening, there were whispers that they were unfaithful to their spouse, that they were having affairs. They were very critical of top law enforcement officials, and they fired a high-ranking law enforcement official who was investigating them. This person I'm describing was the subject of a long-running federal investigation that started shortly after they were elected. They paid a great deal of money to keep an affair secret. They were represented by lawyers who ended up getting in trouble. And they were constantly being bombarded with negative, they would say negative, I would say enlightening, hard-hitting news stories.
Fake news.
They might call it fake news, but they certainly would blame the news media. They would call the reporting a witch hunt, and they would say that they were subject of an unprecedented investigation, that no one had ever been scrutinized as closely as they had been scrutinized before. And while they complained about all the media coverage and all the interest in their doings, they never once asked for a correction or pointed to something that was reported that was not truthful. And in fact, so many exposés, so many revealing and possibly damaging stories came out about them that even people who did not like them became concerned that the volume, the avalanche of exposés would somehow turn them into a sympathetic figure in the public eye and, in fact, strengthen them and help lead to their reelection. And I should also mention they both had a lot of trouble with the IRS. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Well, in light of Mueller, I mean, you would say Trump. I mean, a lot of those fit Trump.
Some people, and depending on who I'm talking to, people think it's Trump. Well, I'm talking about Kwame Kilpatrick.
Yeah.
But every single one of those characteristics, every single one fits both of them
To a T.
to a T, to the R, to the U, to the M, to the P.
There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. I mean, and so...
Big difference, though.
What's that?
One guy was caught.
One's free. Aha. But 2 years into and I guess there's another difference, because 2 years into the Kilpatrick administration, I don't think quite the extent of his problems were so well known. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But I was trying, and I have been trying, to sell a book for some time, and publishers pass for one reason or another. And I've been thinking, you know what I need to do? I don't need to call it the Kilpatrick story. I need to call it Black Trump.
Yeah.
And
that
see
would sell.
if publishers would go for that. I think
anything
it might
Trump.
be less marketable now that the Mueller reports come out, and there seems to be a little bit of a pullback from the
a total and self-serving lie.
Oh man, so many lies. That I don't know that the appetite for Trump stuff is quite as strong. But this Mueller report, it's bringing me back to the many, many years that Jim Schaefer and I investigated the Manoogian Mansion party rumor. And while I will say that I would not rule out Mueller finding that there was collusion or obstruction of justice. I'm not saying that he was going to find that, or I think there's evidence. I would just say I didn't know enough about it to have a strong opinion. I never believed in the Manoogian Mansion party. There was one time where I thought maybe I need to reassess, but I never believed in it. But we spent far longer investigating that than Mueller spent investigating Trump. And to me, it was all worth it because we found out so many other amazing things. Kilpatrick's bodyguards getting outrageous amounts of overtime. Kilpatrick having bodyguards who weren't fit for the job. Kilpatrick's bodyguards being old buddies of his with some questionable conduct. The bodyguard, one of them, ushering Queen Latifah around Detroit and taking her to a motorcycle club, and then all the cops in that precinct being told, stay away from the motorcycle club because Lorenzo Jones is there with Queen
Latifah?
With Queen Latifah. And the guy who confirmed this for Jim and I was a member of the motorcycle gang whose motorcycle club. It's a club,
yes.
Not a gang, motorcycle club, whose name was Pumpkinhead.
Oh, cool.
So we met some interesting people, and we found a lot of really fast. I mean, the mayor's credit card uses, the girlfriends. I mean, so many things came out.
Where did it start? Where did the rumor come from originally? Like, what did you and Jim hear?
Yeah, so I don't know who started it, and there's two reasons I want to know. One is because I think it would be a good story, and it's one of the things that you want to find out. When you start a quest, you want to accomplish it. And so finding out that there was no party makes you want to find out who started the rumor. But the real reason I want to find out who started it is I don't ever want to piss that person off, because I've never seen a rumor so virulent. So it's more virulent than the bug that is racking your sweet soul as we sit here today.
I don't know about that.
Well, yeah.
And now,
it's a very nice soul. But the thing is, there was no proof of it, and it took off, and people to this day believe it as well as they know their own name. They are convinced.
It's the Mandela effect, because it's said so many times that that's what becomes the truth. I remember at Riff, we called neighbors that lived near the Manoogian Mansion, specifically about, hey, was there a party on this date?
Right.
A lot of them said no, but they said, however, there were many other parties.
Yes.
So there was known to be a lot of parties, but the one in particular, I think that got all the attention was the strawberry Tamara Green?
Tamara Green,
oh, thank
right.
God. Tamara Green, where she was allegedly assaulted. But you say that never happened. No evidence of that whatsoever.
There's no evidence that that Kwame Kilpatrick or his wife had anything to do with the death of Tamara Green. Whether they ever crossed paths, I couldn't tell you. I never found any evidence of it. Jim and I did find one former Detroit cop who made a very convincing case that he had met with Tamara Green right after she was assaulted, and that she had confided in him because he knew her from her other work on the streets of Detroit, and that he had kept a journal. And so he had kind of, we see with this Me Too, a lot of these cases are shored up by saying, well, I told 5 people 10 years ago that so-and-so did this to me, and it gives them some credibility. So this guy, his street name or his call sign was Head. We went to go see Head up in the attic of his parents' house to see this journal where he had kept all these notes, and he was, God bless him, I'd say one of God's special people. He had somehow been touched by something, and he seemed to be, let's just say, less credible in person than he was on the phone. And that's the closest we came to it. And Charlie LaDuff, my friend and former colleague at Fox 2, when he was at the Detroit News, when he was my friend and rival when I was at the Free Press, I think pretty conclusively proved that or established through his interviews with Detroit police detectives, that the guy who shot Tamara Green was just another dope man who was trying to kill the guy she was with, and he happened to kill the wrong guy, and it's just one of those things where nobody's ever going to cop to it.
But there was a full-fledged state investigation. Mike Cox ran it.
Yes.
That was into the same exact thing?
So I'm glad you brought up Mike Cox, not just because it's
his
a
gubernatorial
funny name.
run.
Well, when Norman Yatuma and started saying that he had witnesses that worked at the party. So Norman Yatuma came up with 2 witnesses. to the party. One of them was a woman that when Jim and I contacted her, told us that she needed to be exorcised because she was possessed by demons. So we kind of discounted everything she told us.
Kind of like the God guy in the attic.
Yeah. So the other guy says, I was in a biker club and I provided security for the Manoogian Mansion party. And he said, all you guys know me because I saw you out there in your TV live trucks while I was providing security for the Manoogian Mansion party. It's like, we probably would have noticed the first lady pistol whipping a very hot stripper on the front lawn of the mayoral mansion. So I don't think that's credible. Well, Jim and I, because this is what we do, dug really deep on this guy. It turns out he's a complete geek. He wasn't in a biker club. He lived in a really pathetic little trailer in the backyard of his parents' house, and he would scavenge spare parts off broken down motorcycles on the highway. And occasionally he would bring some equally pathetic chick back to his little and this trailer, when I say it's pathetic, it looked like that trailer that Fred Flintstone had, kind of a round thing with one porthole on it, except it wasn't made out of stone. And he would bang skanks in this thing. And he had like a ring of chicken bones around the outside of it because he would just eat carry out and throw it out the window. And so this is the other guy Yatuma brought forward.
So where's Yatuma finding these people? Did they have any relationship to Tamara Green?
No, they just
came to him. Was he like the Avenatti of this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he he
didn't vet them.
I mean, I don't think he found them. I think they found him, and he found that they had some testimony that supported his narrative, and so he used them. And Jim and I did a big investigation on Norman Yatuma later, which is pretty fascinating stuff. But he was a pretty shrewd operator, and he started raising questions about Mike Cox's investigation, and that really did hurt Cox in his bid to be a Republican nominee for governor. And because these allegations came out very close to the primary. And Cox is a great parallel for Mueller, too, because he investigated the Manoogian Mansion party. That was one of his charges. Found no evidence of it. Now, I think Mueller did find some evidence of wrongdoing with Trump, but not enough to bring charges or,
Well, other indictments, too.
Right.
Other people.
But Cox also said, if you remember, that there was evidence of tremendous amounts of overtime being paid to Kilpatrick's bodyguards, which he thought should have been dealt with administratively. And he said the conduct of Chief of Staff Christine Beatty in the firing of Gary Brown is something that Detroiters should be very skeptical of her explanation of why they did it, and may very well provide the grounds for a successful civil lawsuit. And of course,
oh boy, did it ever.
It did, and that lawsuit to go forward a couple of years did end up leading to the downfall of Kwame Kilpatrick. But like Mueller, and as you just touched on, these prosecutions in the Northern District of Virginia and the Southern District of New York, Mueller, and we haven't seen the full report, so we can't judge it quite yet, but Mueller did not find what he felt was strong evidence of collusion or enough evidence to bring a perjury or an obstruction of justice charge. But there were so many other things he found that he parceled off to other prosecutors in cases that are still going and may still yet be a problem for the president. But it's very much like our Manoogian Mansion investigation. It's very much like the Mike Cox investigation, the firing of Gary Brown and the Manoogian Mansion party rumor, in that they didn't find what people thought they were going to find or what some people thought existed, but they found so many other fascinating and important and relevant things that I would say these are not a waste of time. And as we've talked about, you and I privately, and I heard you mentioning it on the Drew and Mike podcast the other day, Mueller's investigation is going to be paid for by the money that the government takes back from Manafort for cheating on his tax and all these other things. So it actually is a net gain for the Treasury. And this is a government that is running massive deficits. So perhaps the only thing Trump has really done to help reduce the deficit is be investigated by Robert Mueller.
Even though he didn't want to.
I mean, yeah, it certainly wasn't a willful thing, but so that's just kind of the incredible thing, and these are the things I think about with these investigations, and when I teach and when I talk to my kids, my students listen to me because they're going to be graded. My kids don't listen to me, but I tell them, do not look up words on the dictionary. If you need to spell something, do not look up words online. If you need to spell something, get a dictionary and look it up, because I guarantee you, on your way to find that word, you find so many other things that are interesting or more interesting. And it's just like, we all
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia
Or YouTube.
You get in that rabbit hole, time slips away, but you find it very fascinating. So I'm not saying whether Mueller's a good guy or a bad guy. I'm not saying whether Trump is a good guy or a bad guy. What I'm saying is, when we take a look at this Mueller report, there's all sorts of criteria that can be used to evaluate it. And I think one of the criteria is, did he find some stuff? And he sure as hell found some stuff.
I won't change my mind on anything, regardless of the facts that are set out before me. I'm dug in, and I'll never change.
Brain nut. Brain cell. Brain nut. Brain cell. Brain nut infinity. Brain cell infinity +1. No.
If you've been following us on social media, we loved you checking us out at ML Soul of Detroit on Facebook, on Twitter, our website, mlsoulofdetroit.com. We're always looking for your input, and we're always looking for great topics. For our great debate, you can reach us at mlsoulofdetroit@gmail.com, or you can give us a phone call at 313-Butterfield-89070, which to you squares is 288-9070. And squares is kind of the topic of the day, because I think there's a lot of squares out there who are getting all worked up about the way our coaches deal with their players. At least that's the way I feel. And joining us to discuss this topic is a man who's written eloquently about the big blow-up between Michigan State coach Tom Izzo and one of his players, Aaron Henry, and that is Shawn Windsor of the Detroit Free Press. And before I let Shawn say a word, I have to give him high marks for his very prescient pick on the MSU Bradley game. While everybody else predicted a blowout for MSU over Bradley, Shawn uncharacteristically came very close to the final outcome. First of all, he picked Michigan State. That's a new thing. And he predicted a close game, 67-60. And in fact, the game was 76-75, but it was not that close. And Shawn nailed it. Let's see if you're just as close to the truth on our great debate topic. Shawn, after that big buildup, are you still there?
Yeah, I just, I like to listen to you talk. I don't really need to talk. I'm sure
you and I have that in common. I love listening to myself talk.
I know you do. In fact, you probably spend all day in the studio, right? Just listening to yourself, recording for who knows what?
I record it, but then I play it back, so there's a pause. So I can listen to myself.
Okay. Well, I don't blame you.
I love the article you wrote about the Izzo Henry blow up, because it is stuff around here that we've seen before. But were you surprised nationally how much attention it got?
Well, I was, and it was an interesting experience for me, and for some of the other folks that have been around Michigan State, the beat writers in particular, or just folks journalists that have been around the program for a while. And it was a little bit. What's the right word? This isn't a word in Mike's vocabulary, but I would say it's a little bit humbling, or it was a little bit humbling, because when it happened, I didn't even watch the whole thing. I was trying to think about what I was writing and so forth. I didn't think a thing about it. I frankly had seen that in the week before in Chicago, and each game, not as much in the Michigan game, but in the first two games when they played poorly early against Ohio State and their opening game of the Big Ten tournament, and then even against Wisconsin, where he went after Gabe Brown, and Foster Lawyer had to kind of hold him back. And he got so mad at Cassius Winston coming off the court at one point. Winston wouldn't sit next to him. And he kept saying, "Get down here and sit next to me." And Winston said no. And later on, Izzo went back at him and said, "I don't even care if you play. I don't care if you go back in the game. It's up to you." And he walked away. And then Winston checked him into a scores table. Tillman had to kind of push him back at one point to try to make his point, and finally yelled. I was sitting right behind the bench. I could hear all this. He was screaming at him, "Just listen to me, listen to me." And then Izzo sort of quieted down and listened. So it's just it's something that unfolds not maybe every game, but most games. So I had no idea that it was becoming a thing until my editor, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later, it started to go viral, emailed me and then texted me and said, "Hey, do you want to write about this?" And I said, "Well, write about what?" Right?
Well, it's
and then as I realized what was going on and started to see and look, and decided that, hey, I am a news guy, I guess, in some way. I better write about this. But that was and Mike can probably relate to this a little bit. That was, and I say humbling because you like to think as a journalist you understand what's going on, especially when you're right there and you have a sense. I had no sense immediately what a national thing that had become.
It's interesting, though, because you just said something that kind of turned a light bulb on for me, because nationally a lot of people are saying you can't yell at people. That's not the right way to motivate. That's not the right way to teach. It really puts them down. But that doesn't seem to be the reason why he's yelling at them. He's yelling at them simply to get their attention so he can tell them what to do. Is that how you see it?
For sure. Yeah, and I get it. It's the optics of that particular exchange, and obviously there were a lot of things that it was a confluence, right? There's a word that none of us love, but the stage, I think that Michigan State, that game kind of had the audience, the college basketball audience to itself. You get a lot more casual viewers because of the bracket and the pool and all that. So people that maybe aren't as familiar. And frankly, the culture has changed. I wrote about this in my column a little bit. The culture is changing around some of these coaches, and for the better in a lot of ways. So all of a sudden, you see that exchange, especially some of the photos where it's a still, and you see that fist balled up, or you can see the rage in his eyes. For those that hadn't seen that before, I'm sure it was startling, and I'm sure some of those images were startling after the fact in the still photos.
Well, it was embarrassing.
Go ahead.
It was embarrassing, and I say this as a former coach who was known as a yeller. Now, I yelled positive things as well as instructional things, and I never put a kid down because I just didn't think those 8-year-olds were tough enough to take the truth. But as a Spartan, you don't want your coach to catch eyeballs across the country and maybe across the world for looking like he's unhinged, that he's totally lost it. And it was, I think, not a great moment for Tom Izzo. It was a moment that was embarrassing for him. It was embarrassing for the program.
But don't you expect it now? I mean, isn't that just kind of the way he coaches?
Well, here's the crazy
emotion?
thing. Last year, when he had this incredibly talented team, he looked like he was in a coma the whole season, and they didn't do anything. So now he's practically, ripping off some kid's head, and they're world beaters, and that kid has the game of Shawn. Didn't Henry go off right after that? I mean, didn't he really deliver in a way that that people had not expected him, because he is just a freshman?
Yeah, there are a couple things here. One, he didn't go off immediately. I think he made a play within a minute or two, but he did some really good things several minutes later, maybe.
Sounds like Shawn's honeymoon.
Down
off in a minute or two.
After she yelled at
him. Yeah, But last year's team, he was absolutely like that. He just, after the stuff happened with Nasser, and he and D'Antoni got linked, he didn't know what to say. He was he was in a fog, and his team was in a fog, and he would tell you that. And so maybe he didn't see it after that. But the beginning part of last year was like that. He's been like that every other year. And I wrote about this in the column, too, and you say it's embarrassing and it's not a great moment for him. Those things are true. What's also true is that you used to look at that not that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, certainly 10, 15 years ago, and chuckle or find it compelling or interesting or even sort of like it.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot more coaches that did it, for one. But, right, he hasn't changed.
Shawn,
Our view of that has changed.
There was a really good comparison because you compared him, I believe, to Gene Cady or even Coach K, and you said he is not like Bobby Knight, and that made me think immediately. Bobby Knight had a couple players transfer because of the way he
choked him.
Well, even before that, he had transfers because of the way he treated them. Has anybody ever transferred out of Michigan State or left early because of the treatment?
He's had a couple guys, but it was playing time. Like Kenny Kaminsky left.
Mm-hmm.
He comes to mind. Garrick Sherman was the one that maybe didn't love the program, but most of those guys know what they're getting into. And I use Bobby Knight, and I don't know if you guys have seen this. There's a 30 for 30 special on ESPN.
Yep.
And the thing that's really the thing that struck me in that documentary is there's audio. It's not video. It's audio of him talking to his team in the locker room, and he makes it all about him. You're embarrassing me, right? Yeah. I don't. I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but that was the idea I was trying to get across. You're not going to do this to me. And I always felt like, or at least down the stretch for Bobby Knight's career, he made it about him. Izzo has never done that. You can take issue with him raging like that to some degree, but and I've heard what he's saying. He's screaming, but he's saying instructive things. And maybe that's counterintuitive, and a lot of kids don't want that today, and I don't blame them. And that's certainly not the only way to coach,
that's
right?
Fine, but to me it begins and ends with Henry. If he doesn't have a problem with it, why should anybody else have a problem with it?
Well, that's a good point. And Izzo, I was actually working on something yesterday, and I was up in the basketball offices for a while, and I talked to him for a while, and we talked about this we talked a lot about what happened that day against Bradley, or that afternoon. And one of the things I told him, I felt like he made a mistake afterwards when he compared his basketball team to any business. He even actually tried to compare it to a newspaper and said, well, don't you want to hold your people accountable and your employees accountable? And the idea of accountability is fine, and that transfers, but the way you deliver doesn't. And even some professors at Michigan State have said, well, I couldn't get away with talking to my students that way. And that's true. They couldn't. And you're not going to talk that way in an office. I mean, maybe Mike and I would talk to each other that way. But for the most part, you can't do that.
Well, there's a big difference. Employees get paid.
What is it? Think about it real quick, Mark. It's a family. A basketball team at the college level, and frankly at a high school level too, not the NBA, it operates a lot like a family. So the volatility and the anger, and you can do that because you've built relationships, and you're there every single day. When you're there for somebody every single day, you can lose it, get mad, get angry, and then apologize and come back, and that's the dynamic of that particular basketball program.
Well, that's interesting because in a family, family members don't get paid by other family members, just like in a college basketball situation, the players aren't paid.
They're paid handsomely.
You rarely see an NBA coach go off like that, or a NFL
Greg
coach.
Popovich is the only one that comes. I mean, you used to see more of that, but Popovich is really the only one left that screams like that.
Well, my problem with Izzo's conduct was I think it created a false impression of him and who he is, because I think he is a caring guy. Sure. And I think it made him look nuts when I don't think he is. But I also have to leave open the possibility that at that moment he was insane, because if Michigan State lost to Bradley, Mr. March goes out in the first round again, and Tom Izzo, he may have reached a point where he's sitting here thinking to himself, this game is everything. And I was embarrassed by the way he conducted himself, and I hope that he took a look at that and he said, I'm not going to be less passionate, but maybe I'm just going to keep my arms by my side. You know what I mean?
But now he's reacting to public opinion, and I'd rather him just be the coach that he is. And the team knows that, and the fans know that, and I don't have a problem with it if the players don't have a problem with it.
Well, I've done things and said things where people have said to me, you know, did you think about how that looks? And I've looked at it and I've said, you know what? My heart was in the right place, but the way I acted was it was not the best thing. And I've learned from it. And I've said, I'm going to be the same guy, but I'm going to make sure that I'm a little careful next time, that maybe I take that pause for poise before I blow my stack. And
I don't think there's any question this will change him, at least when it's on this stage. It will change him just a little bit. Now, he and I were talking about this again yesterday. He's not going to change fundamentally, and he's still going to get angry. But I think subconsciously he can't help but change it. And liken it to a family again, and you have kids, Mike. Surely you've blown up at them over the years and immediately regretted it. Yeah. And immediately felt bad.
Not me, but human fathers have. But no, I take your point. And we all know that Izzo is so vulnerable to public opinion that I'm sure that he's sitting here saying, ooh, that people don't like me as much, and that hurts him. But Shawn Windsor, Detroit Free Press, read his work at freep.com. Pick up a paper for Pete's sake. Give him $1. It's more than worth it. He's in D.C. for the NCAA tournament. Shawn, can you hold on a minute and stick with us through Geek of the Week, because we're gonna touch on this week's choice, and I think you might want to weigh in on this.
Sure. sure, especially if it's you.
I like to refer to this
time.
whole thing, from start to finish, as a real Mickey Mouse operation. But that'd be an insult to Mickey Mouse.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
That last piece of sound you heard was Bobby Knight evaluating this podcast. So, hey, Bobby, if you can hear me, I know it's hot where you're at. You can kiss my ass. This week's Geek of the Week, and I guess I'm going to seem a little bit of a contradictory here, is Nolan Finley, editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press, for his outrageous column criticizing the very coach who I was just kind of criticizing myself, Tom Izzo. And it's not because he rightly says this is not a good look, what Izzo did, but because he drags Larry Nassar into this. And just as a side note, I will just say that every editorial writer and columnist, not the sports columnists, but Metro columnists, God, those are the easiest jobs in the world because he doesn't know Izzo. He didn't call Izzo. He didn't talk to Izzo. He saw something, he had an opinion, and he typed it up.
That's the way it should be, though.
That's easy, though. Why are you paying somebody to say, I read this story in the paper, I saw this on TV, and I think it's good or it's bad?
Unbiased.
End of story, straight to the bar. But Michigan State does have to answer for Larry Nassar. It's something that has hurt the university. We're dealing with it. We're trying to get it right. I don't think we're doing a good job of getting it right. I hope that we will do a better job of getting it right. But we can't bring Larry Nassar up for every silly thing that happens at Michigan State. Sean, are you with me on this?
No, yeah, I am, and it's a little tricky for me. I don't, as a rule, I don't like going after other journalists in the market, especially at at our competitor, the Detroit News. However, it was too bad. I mean, the line he had in the column about I don't know Tom Izzo, or I can't remember the line exactly, but he essentially said I don't know what I'm talking about, and then proceeded to say, well, but I do know what I'm talking about, and that's always a little bit tricky. But you're right. ESPN did this last year when they tried to attach Nassar to D'Antonio and Izzo, but Michigan State's not helping itself in some ways either. John Engler sits courtside at all these games. He was in Chicago. I don't know if he was courtside in Des Moines.
He wasn't courtside, but he was there.
But he sits there, and he the way he kind of takes up all that space, and I don't want to make a judgment on anybody's appearance.
I will. He takes up a lot of seats.
He's the only fan you can see from space.
he's very easy to spot.
Down. No, but it's sort of a grotesque, over the top kind of end of Roman times. Look, he looks like a robber baron from the turn of the century, the century before.
He should have a monocle and a top hat,
or Mr. Smithers helping him out.
He's going to eat little kids, and it's just the idea that a public university has this guy who did so much damage to the state. Whether you agree with him politically or not, and then comes in and was tone deaf through all that Nassar stuff. The fact that he's still around, that they don't have any, that they can't keep him out of that view, that's a terrible look. I think that's far worse in a lot of ways than what Izzo did.
Well, the line that you're referring to, Sean, from the Nolan Finley column is, I've not covered Izzo and don't know him. And that's the point where you really need to say, okay, maybe I'm out of my depth here. And I am, hey, listen, I'm a proud Spartan. You want to criticize Engler, you want to criticize the way the university handled Nassar, I'm with you. I'm shoulder to shoulder with you. But let's keep things where they belong. When we pull this all together, this mishmash, and it's almost like Jussie Smollett trying to say he was a victim of a racial attack. It cheapens every other legitimate attack. But
let me ask you this though: if Nolan was writing for, say, a national paper or maybe somebody out of Waco, Texas, is it that far? Is it that hard to believe that he sees Michigan State and he thinks of Nassar, and then he sees Izzo doing that? I mean, he doesn't, so it's inexcusable.
No, absolutely not. I did radio interviews last year when this was all going on, for either national radio or radio from other states, other parts of the country. I remember one in particular from California, and I got that kind of question all the time. A lot of folks outside this region. I have a really good friend down in Austin, Texas. When I was down there for work back in the fall. And that was the first thing he wanted to talk about was what is going on up at Michigan State, right?
Well,
and this is a guy's from Big Ten country, but it's been colored. The perception is absolutely been.
It might not be fair, but that's the that's the way we think of Penn State, or we did for a long time, and maybe that's the way we think of Baylor.
But that's why it's all the more important that local journalists who know the story, who get the nuance and the subtleties, make the distinction, that they're not part of this sort of short attention span theater where we conflate these things. And if you want to talk about Waco, Texas, this would be this Nassar column this Izzo column by Nolan Finley would be the same as me saying, oh yeah, Waco, Texas, we got that crazy President Bush and that David Koresh, so it must be something in the water at Waco. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's pretty weak.
I mean, you can't do it. So Nolan Finley, congratulations. Put down your bourbon. You're our Geek of the Week.
There's an all-night party in room 7609. And you can dance together all night if you've got the time.
Welcome to Room 7609, which is supposed to be a celebration of new wave music. Great songs, great bands who you may have forgotten, you may have overlooked, or maybe you know their radio hit, but you don't know the deep track that is really worth getting to know. So I feel a little guilty, and I'm Irish and Catholic, so I always feel guilty about something. Usually it's touching myself, which was a song we talked about last week with Divinals. But we're going to start off on sort of a somber note to mark the passing of Ranking Roger, who, of course, was one of the geniuses behind the English Beat and General Public, and a partner of Dave Wakeling, who was often on the radio with our mentor, our impresario, Drew Lane, and, of course, with Marc Fellhauer on the Drew and Mike podcast. But Ranking Roger, man, only like 56?
Well, they said 56. Dave is 62, I believe. And if Ranking Roger was 56, he would have been about 16 or 17 when he joined the English Beat. Is that possible?
He's like a Dominican ball player.
Yeah.
He may be, yeah.
Okay.
He may be the Sammy Sosa of post-punk ska.
So he was a great
Danny
shortstop,
Almonte.
too.
Yes.
I love it. The more I know about Ranking Roger, the more I like him.
If you don't know Ranking Roger, just Google Tears of a Clown, English Beat, YouTube, and enjoy. I thought it was just fantastic. I was so sucked in by that version of that song. You know that version.
Oh, yeah, I do. It's much jauntier than the original.
It's quite something.
But we mourn the passing of Ranking Roger, and this week's selection for Room 7609 comes to us from one of our listeners, and we hope that you're listening. We hope that you reach out to us on social media. It's ML Soul of Detroit on Twitter, Facebook. Our webpage is our website is mlsoulofdetroit.com. You can write to us at mlsoulofdetroit@gmail.com, and you can call us at 313-Butterfield 89070 or 313-288-9070 for those of you who don't appreciate Elizabeth Taylor in a negligee. And if you don't appreciate that, please stop listening, because that's pretty spectacular. Our listener suggested that we play Town Called Malice by Paul Weller, and the jam kind of popular. So we're going to go a little deeper, and there's a tie-in, believe it or not, to Ranking Roger, because Ranking Roger started General Public with members of Dexy's Midnight Runners, and Paul Weller's partner in the Style Council was Mick Talbot, who had been the keyboard player in Dexy's Midnight Runners. And so
there's a lot of crossover in New Wave, isn't there?
Is there some specials crossover too with Ranking Rogers? Ranking Roger?
I don't know. I mean, I gotta believe that at least the horn players sat in on some sessions, right? I mean, how many? Well, I shouldn't say how many English guys were that funky back in the late '70s, early. But you had Madness, you had any number of great bands out there. The Specials, that were just fantastic.
The Specials are out there now, by the way. They're playing in the States.
I'd love to see them. And Mark and I were talking about when we were in college. I graduated from Michigan State in '90, but in East Lansing, there used to be a great ska band that would play primarily in basements. And you'd think the house was going to fall down when they were playing because everybody was dancing and sometimes slam dancing. And they were called Pickle Brown Betty. I don't know where they are now, but man, they could really bring it down. And Mark, who did you say was in Ann Arbor?
Mustard Plug out of Grand Rapids. They were big when I was in college.
What was the name of that band, ML?
Pickle Brown Betty.
Pickle Brown. I'm just going to Google them. It's funny how many cool things happen in basements, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Like
including podcasts. Podcasts, uncomfortable fumbling with classmates, all sorts of things like that. But this week's Room 7609 selection is the Style Council with my ever-changing moods.
Turns to moonlight, and I'm at my best, raising the way onwards, and gazing upon the rest. Yeah, the cool before the warm, the calm after the storm. The cool before the warm, the calm after the storm. I wish to stay forever, letting this be my blue. Oh, but I'm caught up in a whirlwind. Ever-changing moods, yeah. Baby turns to sugar, some call it passive chew. But the day things turn sweet for me won't be too soon. Oh, the hush before the silence, the winds after the blast. Oh, the hush before the silence, the winds after the blast. I wish we moved together. It's time the bus is soon. Oh, but we're caught up in the wilderness and an ever-changing moods, yeah. Children who've never had the time to commit the sins they pay for through another's evil mind. The love after the hate, the love will lead to late. The love after the hate, the love will lead to late. I wish we wake up one day, everyone will move up, caught up in the dailies and none. Ever-changing moods, yeah. Let me tell you now. Hey.
Cool before the warm. That sounds pretty good. Sounds like our forecast. Is Rich Luderman sneaking into room 7609? Is that him in the corner there?
No, he's not allowed in room 7609.
Well, if you've heard some of the stories Rich Luderman has to tell, room 7609 is getting a little hot.
If he has some new wave cred, he's allowed in, but I'm not aware of that.
Well, you know, and Drew is working the velvet rope. So if you want to get in room 7609, you got to get through Drew Wave.
I better see a skinny tie on him or something.
I got my rooster on, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you do. You got a skinny tie.
I'm ready to go.
I just want to say my ever-changing moods is an example of Paul Weller, okay, The Jam was monster
Sure.
band in the UK. Nothing over here. Style Council, somehow that song actually hits Billboard and reaches number 29. It was a small hit. But over there, it was Style Council versus The Jam. Oh, what a joke!
Yeah,
what happened to Paul Weller?
It's like REM fans that say, "Oh yeah, once Superman came out and all, I don't like REM anymore," and I don't really.
Once they had hits and Grammys, I hated them.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of these songs, I think you have to watch them over time, and you see that. Looking back on it now, it's sort of like I always want to compare things to Beatles. The solo Beatles music in the 70s, there's some fantastic songs.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, there was a lot of slagging on those guys. And I think Style Council, same thing, because Paul Weller now is playing My Ever-Changing Moods, which I don't think he played live for a decade and a half.
I saw him at St. Andrews, I think it was last year, and he played several Style Council tunes, and they're great. I first heard them... my girlfriend, when I first went to college, had an LP, which tells you it was a while ago. But it's just great. You know, it's not really like lounge music, but it has a very sort of happy, upbeat. I think of English guys wearing tan raincoats, running to get on the double-decker bus, and then maybe having a cocktail somewhere, or meeting a demure young woman somewhere off of Piccadilly.
I can see the video right now.
He has a new album out, a new live album, live at the Royal Festive Hall. I don't know if that's different from the Royal Albert Hall. I'm sure it is.
It may be a play on words. He is the mod father, so he
Other
knows a little bit about wordplay. What Mick Talbot? Do we have a Mick Talbot update? Is he on the side of an English milk carton? I guess it'd be an imperial pint of milk or something. I don't think the post Style Council career went as well for him, but you know what, folks? This was it's our choice, but it was inspired by you guys, and we want you to give us suggestions for everything. Geek of the Week, The Great Debate, Room 7609. We want you to feel some ownership over this show, because without you, we're nothing. So reach out to us. Let us know what you're thinking about. And last week, for those of you who forgot, go check us out on Google Podcasts. Check us out on iTunes. Check us out on Stitcher. We're on Stitcher. Rate us unless you hate us. Last week we talked about one of the great female-led new wave bands, Divinals, and this week, if I wanted to keep with our suggestion from a listener, but I wanted to do Transvision Vamp this week, and maybe we'll do them next week, or one of the other great underappreciated female-fronted new wave bands, because there's so many good ones out there.
Oh yeah, and so many that people forget about, and I find them, I go, oh my God, that band.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and if you listen to Berlin, anybody who's seen
The Vapors.
What was that? Females in the Vapors?
No,
okay. But
that's Turning Japanese.
Right. I was going to say I didn't know there's ladies in the Vapors, but I know ladies.
They're back together.
Ladies have vapors in them.
Okay, Romeo Void.
Romeo Void. The moniker's better. They slept together.
Yeah, I might like you better if we slept together. And then you see the girl, and you go,
wow, Annabelle Lynn.
Yeah, especially today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
She didn't age too well.
I don't think. Well, she was kind of huge at the time.
Yeah.
So Transvision Vamp, by the way, the lead singer. Wow. You see her now. Ow. It turns out that being really cool and getting into every club and doing everything that somebody offers you
can age you.
Real fast. Real fast. Well, anyways, that's Room 7609. Another episode of ML Soul of Detroit is in the can. Marc Fellhauer, thanks for getting out of your sickbed to make it happen. Mr. Drew Lane, thanks for coming downstairs to make it happen, metaphorically and literally. And hey, if you haven't seen the story about the show on Fox 2, check it out at fox2detroit.com. That's where you'll find the rest of my work. You can always find Shawn Windsor in the Free Press. Until next week, thanks for listening. Cyrus, take us out.
Can you dig that? Can you dig it? Can you dig
Dangerous Assignment, starring
ML Elrick
as Steve Mitchell, is written by Bob Reif and Adrian Jandot, with music composed and conducted by Basil Adlam, and is produced and directed by
Marc Fellhauer.
Be with us again next week at this time when
ML Elrick,
starring as Steve Mitchell, will embark on another dangerous assignment.